Okay, let's start with the nocar mantra. Om Namo Arihantanam, Om Namo Sitanam, Om Namo Ayadiyanam, Om Namo Vajayanam, Namo Loe Savasahunam, Eso Panchanamo Karo, Sava Pavapanasano, Mangalalancha Savesim, Paramam Have Mangalam, Paramam Have Mangalam. Thank you everybody for coming this week. I really appreciate your time. I don't take it for granted at all. So this is a mara, right? Does anybody use one? Oh, that's great. Got it right there. Nick, tell me how you use it.
How I use it? Like yes. How I hold it? Or is that what you're asking?
No. What do you do? How do you use it? Like what prayer do you say? How do you move across the beads with each words?
So, I don't know. Originally, I was always one beat ahead. So I use it for the nocar, and I say the nocar using the Mara to count to count how many nocar I've said.
Right.
And I say the nocar and I push one bead to the left or up, depending on how I'm holding it.
Do you say Do you say one line per bead or one nocar mantra per bead?
No, one nocar mantra per bead.
Okay.
And then I use my thumb to push the bead across. And there's a small gap in between.
Great. So, Mihir, can you tell us how you use the mara?
You're on mute.
Okay, now I'm on. So, like Nick said, I use the same way, and what I've also done is the way I understand what Nick just explained. It's called Bandhi Naukarwadi. Means on each bead you say the whole naukar. And what I've done is you just basically kind of flip through it and just keep on saying naukar however many you can say it. But what I did routinely before was on one bead I would say Om Rim Sri Parshvanathaya Namo Namaha. And I was told in childhood that if you do Om Rim Sri Namo Nanassa, that helps your memory. So I have done those as well in past.
Great. So those are very common ways to use it. Typically, you hold it like this, and as you go through the nocar mantra, you advance one bead, and you let gravity take it on the other side. And the great thing about it is you can use it when your eyes are closed, because you just have to feel the beads, and you'll feel the end of the bead when you're done. So you don't, the end of the mara when you're done, so you don't have to worry about that. And that has been the typical way to use it, is that you either say one line of the nocar mantra per bead, or you say one nocar mantra per bead. And so there are 108 beads on the mara. And so there are 9 lines in the nocar mantra. So if you do line by line, then you end up saying the nocar mantra 12 times. And obviously if you do one nocar mantra per mala, you're saying the nocar mantra 108 times, which is great. Thank you for everybody who just joined. Today we're going to learn a better way to use the mara. Those are great ways to do it, and I don't begrudge anybody for doing that. It's certainly very hard to do. It's hard to keep your concentration up for 108 nocar mantras, or frankly, even 12 nocar mantras. But today we're going to learn a better way to use the mara. So why do we say the nocar mantra when we use the mara?
I think Nokar Mantra is our, namaskar to Panch Paramesti. And like every time other than just using mala, when we say Nokar Mantra, what we are saying is we want to acquire the qualities of Panch Paramesti and achieve moksha.
That's right. That's exactly right. The original name of the Nokar Mantra was the Namaskar Maha Mangal Sutra. That's a very formal name. That's how all the scriptures refer to it. Later, that was shortened to Namaskar Mangal Sutra. Later, for common people, it was called the Namaskar Mantra, and then it ended up being the Nocar Mantra. So the Panchparmesti are the Arihants, the Siddhas, the Acharyas, the Upadhyas, and the Sadhus and Sadhvis. And the reason that the Nocar Mantra is associated with the Mara is because of the Panchparmesti. Mihir is exactly right. We do not worship people. Okay, we do not worship people in Jainism. Even though we see an idol sometimes, we don't worship that person. We worship that person's accomplishments. We worship the qualities of that person that made them able to see the truth, right? And so each of the Panchparmestis have a different number of attributes. So for example, the Aryans have 12 attributes, the Siddhas have 8 attributes, the Acharyas have 36 attributes, the Upadhyas have 25 attributes, and the Sadhus have 27 attributes. So if you add all those up, it equals 108. And so that's why the number 108 is so important in Jainism. So here's a better way to use the mala than perhaps what you have been thinking, because it does get a little bit boring. And not to say that that's not important, the ability to keep your concentration for that long, but especially for kids when they're just starting out, it's a little bit boring, right? So we need to make it a little bit interesting. So if there are 108 attributes, why don't we think about each attribute as we advance one bead on the mala? And so, for example, there are 12 attributes of the Arihant, right? So instead of saying Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayaryanam, Namo Ujayanam, why don't we say Namo Arihantanam 12 times and think about each one of the attributes as we say it? Why don't we say Namo Arihantanam, 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 Namo Arihantanam. And I'm right here on the mala. I'm on the 12th beat. And then I would move to the Siddhas for 8 times. Namo Siddhanam, 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 Namo Siddhanam. And I'm right here, right? So each time I said it, I thought of that particular attribute. Now, isn't that much more interesting? And isn't that actually the point? Isn't the point of saying the Nocar mantra to think about the qualities of those people? And if there's one mala per quality, well, isn't it much more interesting to think of 108 different things than perhaps just one thing each bead? Wouldn't that get kids interested in it? Wouldn't that get you more interested in using the mala? And so the obvious downside is, well, if you want to close your eyes, you have to memorize the 108 attributes. But you can use a piece of paper. Isn't the point to be thinking about that, to be doing samvar, to be performing nirjara? You can open your eyes and use a piece of paper until you have it memorized. So I submit to you that that is a better way to use the mala, especially for children as you're just beginning. Thoughts on that, or criticisms on that?
No criticism. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Nick.
Sorry, go ahead.
Now, what I was going to say is this is very, very interesting. And yes, I agree with that. It's just that we need to probably have another marker at every 12th or 8th or whatever beat it comes through to make sure we don't use our efforts to count as well. Rather than counting, we need to have some sort of an indicator. Right now we have 108. You added at the end of 8, yes, at the end of 12, you can add another indicator or somewhere that you need to move on to the next attribute.
But you only need an indicator if you're saying the same thing each time, if you're thinking the same thing each time. If you're thinking about 12 different things, you know when you're on the 12th one and to move to the next one, to the attributes of the sadhus on number 13, right?
If you're reading those, yes. But I thought we are saying that we are going to say Namori Antana 12 times and think about those 12 different attributes.
That's right. You say the same thing 12 times, but you think about 12 different attributes. So as you're thinking about the 12th one, wouldn't you automatically jump to the 13th one, even if you had just memorized the list?
Correct. That would
Then
work.
do you need to use the mala?
Oh, of course not. You never need to use the mala. The mala was always a device to help you as you're doing it. If you don't need to, then don't do it.
So I think that, you were asking, like, what's the thoughts on it? I think the first thing that the kids learn anywhere is the nocar mantra, right?
Right.
And because it's so ingrained, like as the 101, the first thing you learn kind of thing, it has been kind of at least engraved in our minds to use that for the nocar, right? And so as we use it, and as we use it doing Purusha, and as we use it doing Samaik, as we use it doing Pratikamar, and as we use it in all of these other attributes, it's interesting, like, when people say a certain number of nokarvatis, right? Like if you're going to say, hey, I'm going to say 108, right? Well, that's one whole, that's one whole nokarvati. But does it make a difference if you say 108 or 110? Like, do you get bad punya for saying two more, right? Like,
no, absolutely not.
Right. So I guess sometimes I feel like it's holding us back from doing something. Like we want to know we're done with something, and so we're not really knowing that you've finished that, especially since we've been doing this 2 or no karate a day, thing, which by the way, Kaushal's not here, but hopefully he's keeping up with it. So
right. So you hit the nail on the head. The mara is a chunking mnemonic. So what's chunking? Chunking is when you break up a big goal into smaller goals, you're more likely to achieve that bigger goal. If I tell you to do 108 nokar mantras, you probably won't do it. But if I tell you to finish the mara, well, it's a little goal you have in mind, and you get a little hit of dopamine for each bead that you cross, right? You're that much closer to accomplishing your goal. So who's figured this out? Pharmacists have figured out chunking. So there's a problem where people don't finish their medications because they feel better. So they're like, oh, I don't have to take the rest. And that's not the way you use medications. A course is, for example, 12 days. There's a 12-day course of medication and people are cutting it off at 6. So pharmacists have used chunking. They've divided the 12 into 3 groups of 4 called red, yellow, and green. And it's the same pill inside each one. But the pill is red, the pill is yellow, and the pill is green. So that has increased compliance with finishing the course of your medication by an astronomical percentage. By over 20% people, there's nothing different. The only thing is psychological chunking, right? So this is a psychological hack to allow us to complete the 108. There's no special... if you do 110, that's better than 108. And if you do 106, that's a little bit worse than 108. So you hit the nail on the head right there.
Do you know the difference between, this and a rosary, or, like other religions use this type of, rosary type of, thing in Christianity and things like that. Is that also 108? Does anyone know how many beads are in that?
I do not know, but I'm willing to entertain anybody who does.
Sorry.
Google says generally has 10 beads. A 5 decade would have 59 beads. There's a large bead, small marble beads. It's interesting. Maybe dive into what you were saying, to have markers on it. While the Jain Maya has 108 similar, identical beads. The ones in Catholicism seem to have different sizes to designate different segments.
So, Setu, I typed in how many beads in a Catholic rosary beads. How many beads in that? And it says there's 108 beads. It says rosary beads generally informed. A rosary is a circular string of beads used by Roman Catholics for crowning prayers. Many reasons have been given for the 108 beads. I don't know if it's 108, you know. And then I guess there's another one that's just called the rosary one, and that's 50 beads. So.
This one, I see a couple different, I'll read more into it. It's 59 beads, which 2 rounds of that is 118.
Yeah,
you know,
and it is interesting. The pictures that are shown are like, you know, like every 5th bead or 3rd bead or whatever is a different bead, right? You know.
Timur, going back to kind of the original question you posed, especially for kids, early on in their Jainism journey, they're taught nocar mantra, right? And it becomes just like this rote exercise of just knock it out. Just say it 10 times, say it 3 times before a drive, say it, 3 times every morning before you go to bed. Take the mara, just crank it out 108 times. And it's like asking a kid, say the alphabet 20 times fast, and they'll just zip through it, and you get the elemental P's, which anything that can get us, myself included, right, back to why are we doing this? What are we actually saying? What are we supposed to be reflecting on, and what does it actually mean? Is more important. So if you can, right, it becomes a race, right? Can I do it in 12 minutes? Can I do it in 10 minutes? Well, if it takes you 20 minutes to do it one attribute at a time, but you actually reflect more and get a deeper appreciation or better appreciation of what you're actually saying and why you're actually saying it, in my mind, it's more valuable to say it 10 times instead of 108, but you actually learn something or gain something more personally than just, cranking it out 108 times.
You're absolutely right. And that is one of the main things we've hit on in this class, is that what are we supposed to be thinking about when we say these prayers? Well, we're supposed to be thinking about the meaning of the words. And if you're right, if you say it one time and it takes you 15 minutes, that's better than if you say it 20 times and that takes you 15 minutes. Certainly, and you think about the meaning of the words while you're saying it that one time. So let's go over the attributes, what we're supposed to think about. And the reason that it's the nocar mantra is that now that we've realized that the nocar mantra is actually 108 attributes that we're supposed to be thinking about, now we realize that the entirety of Jainism is contained in the nocar mantra. Just like previously we've concluded that, well, ahimsa grew so much to kind of be the entirety of Jainism when you think about ahimsa. The same thing is true here. The nocar mantra has grown so much that it envelops the entirety of Jainism. And you'll see why as we go through the attributes. So the word arihant is made up of 2 words. Ari means enemy and hunt means destroyer. And the arihants have 12 attributes that we look up to. And the arihants are the tirthankars. And so the reason that they're first is because they are the enlightened souls that set up the 4-fold order of the Jain system. Remember that you can go to moksha and not be a Tirthankar. There are many, in fact, most of the souls in moksha are not Tirthankars. In this last cycle, we only had 24 Tirthankars, Mahavir being the latest one. So when we say I bow down to the Arihants, we are bowing down to the 12 attributes of the Tirthankars. And those 12 attributes are omniscience, they deliver sermons, they're worshipped by other souls, and then in their vicinity, when they're on earth, in their Tirthankar form, there are no calamities or diseases that exist in their vicinity. Those are the 4 main ones. The 8 other attributes are, they have a divine seat from which they deliver sermons, there's a halo that appears around their head, angels appear around them waving fans, there's an umbrella over their head which represents hell, earth, and heaven. It's a 3-tiered umbrella. They sit under a tree and they're continuously showered with fragrant flowers. They have a divine announcement whenever they deliver their sermon, and they have music accompanying their sermons. So this is kind of weird, right? Like, why am I interested in thinking about a shower of flowers for the Arihant when I'm... So let's, if we're saying Namo Arihantanam 12 times, one of them, we think about a shower of fragrant flowers that appears, or angels that wave fans around them. Why are we doing that? What is the point of doing that? And we're in chapter 2 of the book, the Panchparmeshti. This is where all the attributes are listed. So why would I think of, a sermon delivered by the Arihant when I'm thinking about that attribute? What does that do for me? Well, I would suggest that it lets you think about the history, that the fact that there is evidence of people that have achieved this state and the type of things that can happen when you achieve this state. The type of things, especially for omniscience and no calamities or diseases, the type of things that are possible, right? Because we have to have a goal to look forward. Our goal is not to be a Tirthankar. Okay, our goal is to be a Siddha. There's I don't know the chances, but there's probably quite a low chance that we're going to be a Tirthankar, right, in the future, right? But we want to respect this person because without this person, we wouldn't have even known about the Siddhas. Okay, so we want to respect the qualities of the person that led to this result. So let's talk about the Siddhas. 8 attributes of the Siddha. Infinite knowledge, infinite perception, perfect conduct, infinite energy, uninterrupted happiness, immortality because of no body, formlessness because of no body, and they're equal with all the other Siddhas. So here we're starting to get a little bit more like, oh, okay, I see why I'm thinking about these attributes. Well, let's say when I say Namo Siddhanam 8 times. Okay, I'm thinking about each one of these attributes. And this is a little more easy to understand why we would do this. For example, infinite knowledge, right? You're thinking about what you are, because you are a soul and you possess infinite knowledge. It's just obscured by your karma. You are a soul, you have infinite perception, you have infinite energy, you have immortality. So you remember that this is where you want to go. You want to uncover all these characteristics of yourself when you think about each one of these attributes of the Siddha. And remember, you don't have to memorize it. We can make a chart if you want, or if some entrepreneurial spirit wants to make a chart of the 108 attributes and share it with the class, you can do the mala in front of a piece of paper and think about each one of the attributes. So the Acharyas have 36 attributes. And here's where it really shines, because this is what we want to do in our daily life, and this will remind you basically everything about Jainism. So the first 5 attributes are their control over their 5 senses, right? They don't seek pleasure in each one of the senses. And that's something to think about. You could think about that for a long time for each one of the senses, right? Well, what are the senses of touch, right, that we want to avoid? We want to avoid taking excess pleasure in, you know? Taste, that's an easy one, right? Food, right? Smell, sight, and hearing. You could think about this a long time. What in your life do you need to control in order to gain control over your 5 senses, just like acharyas? 9 ways to guard against sensual pleasure, right? These are the next 9 attributes of the acharyas, of which there are 36. Not to stay in or near a place where persons of the opposite sex live, not to be alone with the member of the opposite sex, not to observe the body of the person of the opposite sex, so lust there, not to consume intoxicating foods or liquids, not eating tasty foods, not adorning or decorating the body, wearing simple clothes, things like that. Now it's real easy. It really shines about this method of thinking about each one of the attributes as you do one bead of the mara. The next 4 attributes of the acharya are free from anger, ego, deceit, and greed, right? This is our wheelhouse. We spend a majority of our time talking about this, but each one of those is just one mara on the 108. So you can see how we'll get to all of Jainism pretty soon. The next is that acharyas observe the 5 great vows, of which are, of course, non-violence, non-lying, non-stealing, celibacy, and non-attachment. So we see that we can think about the 5 great vows. There's plenty to think about there. The next 5 attributes of the acharya is that they observe the 5 codes of conduct: right knowledge, right faith, right conduct, tapachar, right conduct regarding austerities, and number 5 is vidyachar, right conduct regarding mental, verbal, and physical abilities. The next 5 of the acharyas are the samitis, or how they're cautious in the way they live. They're cautious in their movement, speech. They're cautious in accepting alms. They're cautious in handling clothes, pots, and pans. And they're cautious in getting rid of their bodily waste. These are great things to think about, 1 per bead, remember, how we can incorporate that into our life. The next 3 attributes of the acharya are restraining bad thoughts, bad language, and bad physical activities, or man, vachan, kaya. Oh, that was the last one. Okay, so questions about any of the attributes we've talked about so far. The attributes of the arihant, of which there are 12, the attributes of the siddha, of which there are 8, and the attributes of the acharya, of which there are 36.
Timber, as I go through this, it's very interesting that what you asked earlier, we should do nocar mantra versus this. It just seems like we are going from elementary to intermediate level, and we basic. And I'm certainly going to ask, but it seems like as kind of people graduate, and even in India, I don't even know if my parents do this with this 108 qualities or gun that we are trying to acquire. But I think it's a very good idea. I mean, in fact, I just believe that's probably the purpose, and that's what Maharaj Sahib and others who are kind of more advanced do it. And it is letting us connect to what we are really trying to accomplish, other than just saying it and trying to meditate and concentrate. And I think this is probably going to help us more to go in that direction.
Right. And it's just a reminder. Remember, mantras work because they bring things to the front of your mind. So if you're doing these 108 attributes and you're bringing these to the front of your mind every day, I mean, sometimes I forget that there are 5 codes of conduct. I'll never forget that there are 4 passions. We talked about that a lot. But sometimes I forget that there are 3 restraints of thought, speech, and body. Or sometimes I forget that there's 5 kinds of ways I should be cautious, right? It's just a lot of groupings of stuff to remember. But if I do that, if I remember each of those once every day, I'll never forget that. And my life will change. My life will have no choice but to change. If I remember that, just remember that these things exist every day, right? Certainly I never forget about Jainism, right? But certainly there are some days in your life where you forget you're Jain, right? But if we remember these things every day, then that will help us change our life.
One thing I'll have to admit, I mean, until now or until recently, I did not know about this. I'm sure there are, pravachans and vyakhyanas where they talk about this. I've never been exposed to it. Whereas my kids have been talking about it, and thanks to Jaina curriculum and the others, but the kids are exposed to it at this pretty early age and know about it. So I think they can, or now we all can advance to this level. But I did not run into it, or maybe did not look for it in my childhood days.
Right.
So one question on this one. We are talking about 108 attributes, and based on what we learned, each acharyas, siddhas, arihants, generally you build on the things. So for instance, non-violence should be one of the most basic one. I think probably we'll cover those things at 108, which means you may cover the same attribute more than once, I believe. Shouldn't that be the case? Because if we are saying acharya with these 36 attributes, all of those 36, some of those should be part of one step down version. Some of that should be part of even further step, like non-violence, non-stealing. All of those should be the attribute of the starting point.
That's right. So as we learn about sadhus and sadhvis, we're going to repeat the five vows. Because, of course, the acharyas take the greater versions of those vows,
right.
And the sadhus and sadhvis take the greater versions. The shravaks and shravikas take the lesser version. But those five are duplicated. You're right. There are some that are duplicated. Absolutely. So let's finish it up and turn to Upadhyas and then sadhus and sadhvis. So the attributes of the Upadhyas are the 11 Anga Agams, that is the canonical text of Jainism, which they must learn. The 12 Upanga Agams, this was a later text that came. So the Anga Agams were compiled by the disciples of Mahavir, and the 12 later texts were written down by other people later in time. So that's 11 and 12 is 23. There's one text of proper conduct known as the Charan Satari, and there's one text of proper practice known as the Karan Satari. So these are the 12 attributes we think of when we think about Upadhyas. And I forgot to mention, maybe you guys know, but real quickly, the Arihants are the Tirthankars, the Siddhas are the non-Tirthankars that are in Moksha. The Acharyas are human souls that are humans right now that have achieved one of the highest levels of Jainism. They're our teachers. They're the place from which all the information flows. They have devoted their lives to studying Jainism. The Upadhyas are one level down from the Acharyas if it was hierarchical, and the Sadhus and Sadhvis are just one level down from that. So if you become a sadhu, then the next step is to become an Upadhyaya, and the next step is to become an Acharya. So in case you didn't know that or we didn't go over that. So those are the 25 attributes of the Upadhyas. It's all those texts they have to learn. And so that will remind us, when we think about each one of the texts, that will hopefully remind us that, hey, they exist and it's on my list to go read those texts that all these Upadhyas know, right? And so the sadhus and sadhvis, what are their attributes? The 5 major vows, again, non-violence, non-lying, non-stealing, celibacy, and non-possessiveness. Okay, so let's talk about it's 27 for the sadhus and sadhvis, so that was the first 5. The next 6 are that they protect the one-sense beings. Remember, it was surprising for us to learn that water, fire, earth, and air are alive. Those are the 1 sense beings. Some plants are 1 sense beings. And then protecting moving living beings, which are the 2 to 5 sense beings. So that's the next 6 attributes. Controlling pleasures from the 5 senses. Again, great comment that these are repeated. We're going to control the 5 senses. The 5 types of carefulness, we've already talked about. The samithis, that's repeated. Controlling mind, speech, and body, repeated. Not eating before sunrise and sunset, that's a great one to remember. Forgiving others, sometimes I have to remember that. Avoiding greed, enduring hardship, enduring suffering. Being introspective and keeping the heart pure. So if we go through all of those, that would number 27. And then for the Digambar tradition, there's slight differences, not any major differences that we need to talk about. If somebody would like to talk about the Digambar tradition, that's fine. That's in the book, just next to the ones that I'm going over in chapter 2. So questions or comments about the attributes of the Upadhyas or the Sadhus and Sadhvis. And so this is really easy to see how it's beneficial to us. Unlike the Tirthankars, which is a little bit crazy, right? Like, why should I remember that does anybody have a better answer? Why should I remember that there's one of the attributes of a Tirthankar is that a halo appears beside his head? Or that his seat is divine where he delivers sermons. So it's real easy to see how this would apply to our life. Questions or comments, or if anybody has an answer to that initial question about Tirthankars, I'd love to hear it. All right, great. No questions or comments. So what I'd like for you to take away is, remember, when we say something, we think about the words that we're saying and we think about what they mean. There's a better way to pray than we have been praying and we have been teaching our kids to pray. And it's not a mark of honor if you close your eyes and pray. It's not a mark of honor if you don't use a piece of paper to pray. If you want to pray and have this book open or have a piece of paper open, you are doing something better because you are focused on the point of the prayer. You're doing something better than somebody that can sit down for 48 minutes with one of these and has the patience to go through it and think about what they're going to do tomorrow while they're doing it, or think about what they're going to have for dinner while they're doing it. You are doing more for yourself. You're doing more for your life than the person that has the ability to do that. And as Nick mentioned, this is an artifact, right? You don't need this. If you can think about the 108 attributes without the Mara, do it. If you need the piece of paper, do it. Whatever helps you to get to the point of the prayer. Whatever helps you to do that, do that. If you don't like the Mara because you have, fat fingers like I do, they make big ones. They make like really big ones where it's really easy to tell what bead you're on. Get one of those. If you don't think that we should use any artifacts or idols at all, don't. Because remember, the point is all internal. The point is to change your life based on what you know is the truth. And unfortunately, it takes a lot of reminders for us to know what the truth is, because the entire world is trying to distract us from our goals. And this is what I tell my children and what I need to remember myself. Anything and everything, including yourself, is trying to distract you from your goals. Your brain is trying to distract you from your goals. That's what that means. So we always say in this house, anything and everything are trying to distract you from your goals. Thanks so much for your time, everybody, this week. That's all I have for you. I really appreciate you coming back each week and spending an hour with me. I don't take it for granted. I try to increase the value of Jainism and how to apply it in your life. That's been the number one goal of this class, is how can we take Jainism out of the classroom and into your life? And I hope that you think about doing this new way to do the Mara, and I hope that it works for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Damien.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye.